Erased by HR's transition, my revenge canceled the launch, filed liens, restored my throne. They replaced me at 8:17 a.m. with a single ice-cold roll transition email. Their mistake wasn't firing me. It was forgetting who filed the $220 million patent that kept their lights on. I didn't call a lawyer first. I simply opened the employment addendum and turned to the reversion clause, the one I wrote myself. My name is Sloan Mercer. I am 42 years old. At 8:17 a.m. on a Monday that smelled of industrial cleaner and impending rain, my professional life was terminated by an automated email. The notification slid onto my screen without a sound. A bloodless little banner at the top right. The sender was the HR service desk, and the subject was VP Product Transition. It arrived with the sterile punctuality of a scheduled execution. For a full 10 seconds, I just stared at it, my hand frozen on the mouse. The ambient noise of the 43rd floor of the Slate Hall Tower seemed to fade into a low hum, the whisper of the ventilation system, the distant rhythmic tap of a colleague's keyboard, the soft whir of the server racks in the glass-walled room down the hall. Everything felt normal, which made the subject line feel like a glitch in the matrix. I clicked. The body of the email was brief, composed entirely of the kind of polished, frictionless corporate language designed to prevent a lawsuit. It spoke of strategic realignment, synergy, and positioning the company for the next fiscal quarter. It thanked me for my invaluable contributions. Then, in the third paragraph, it named my replacement for the Aegis Graph Engine project, Camille Dorian. Ibroka Camille, of course. The name hung there on the screen, a perfect symbol of the company's new direction. I, Sloan Mercer, the architect who designed and built Aegis from a single line of code in my home office 2 years before I even joined Norbridge Dynamics, was being replaced by a vice president of marketing whose primary technical skill was crafting a compelling PowerPoint deck. I had built the engine. She was going to pick the paint color and sell it. The email offered no transition plan, no meeting invitation, no request for a handover of files. It was a clean cut, an amputation. Ibroka curiosity, cold and sharp, pricked at me. I opened the corporate calendar application and tried to book a meeting room, any small glass-walled box, for the next hour just to see. The system returned an error, access denied, user privileges insufficient. I navigated to my own profile in the company directory. My title, Director of Product Aegis, was still there, but next to my name, a new parenthetical tag had appeared, Guest. In the space of 3 minutes, I had become a visitor in the house I had built. A profound, chilling stillness settled over me. There was no anger yet, just a strange, detached clarity. I stood up, my chair rolling back with a soft, expensive sigh on its casters. The open-plan office stretched out before me, a landscape I knew intimately, the precise angle of the morning light cutting across the polished concrete floors, the murmur of the sales team on their morning calls, the low thrum of productivity. But now, it felt alien. As I walked toward the central conference area, a wave of subtle motion preceded me. Heads that had been up ducked down. Conversations that had been bubbling went flat. Mark from engineering, a man with whom I'd spent countless late nights debugging the core algorithm of Aegis, suddenly became fascinated by something on his monitor, his shoulders hunching forward. Sarah from legal, who had helped me navigate the initial patent filings, turned and walked briskly in the other direction, her phone pressed to her ear. They all knew. The email hadn't just gone to me. The air in the main conference room was thick with the smells of a morning meeting just concluded, the ozone tang of the laser printer, the acrid scent of burnt coffee from a pot left on the warmer too long, the faint papery smell of fresh documents. They had been in here, planning this, planning the future of my project without me. The thought didn't sting. It was simply a data point. I returned to my desk, the silence around my cubicle now a palpable force field. I sat down and saw a new notification blinking in the corner of my screen. It was from Slack, a message from Camille Dorian posted in the public Aegis launch channel team. It began, bright and authoritative, excited to hit the ground running. First priority is to optimize the Aegis brand narrative for a fourth quarter global launch. Let's streamline the messaging and focus on the value added. Big things ahead. Optimize the brand narrative. She was talking about my life's work, as if it were a tube of toothpaste. Aegis wasn't a narrative, it was a probabilistic risk modeling engine that could process event-based data streams in real time. It could predict credit defaults with 31% greater accuracy than any other system on the market. It was a beautiful, complex machine of pure mathematics, and she wanted to streamline the messaging. My phone buzzed on the desk. A private message this time, from Marcus Thorne, the interim CEO. He was a finance guy, a placeholder put in charge after the old guard had been forced out 6 months ago. His message was a masterpiece of corporate cowardice. Sloan heard the news went out. Just a minor restructuring to align product with marketing. No reflection on your excellent work. Let's be sure to maintain a good relationship moving forward. Debrokwi, maintain a good relationship. He fired me with a service desk email and then texted me platitudes about staying friends. I didn't reply. I placed the phone face down on the desk. My gaze drifted back to my calendar, still open on the screen. My week had been wiped clean. Meetings canceled, appointments deleted. All except one. There it was. An oversight. A beautiful, fatal oversight. Tuesday, 9:30 a.m., meeting, Aegis Licensing Phase 1, host Sloan Mercer, attendees Norbridge Dynamics Legal, Harborline Pensions Investment Group, A. Broswa Harborline Pensions, the first major licensing deal, a $40 million entry fee to a pipeline that 3 independent firms had valued at $220 million over the next 30 to 6 months. They had forgotten to remove me as the host. They had left me holding the keys to the kingdom just as they were kicking me out the door. The cold stillness inside me began to coalesce into something else, something hard and clear. I swiveled in my chair and turned to the gray 2-drawer filing cabinet tucked under my desk. My fingers found the small silver key I kept in a separate compartment of my wallet. The lock turned with a well-oiled click. I bypassed the files on project timelines and budget reports. I was looking for a specific folder, one labeled Mulk. Inside, beneath a copy of my LLC formation documents, was a single 10-page document, my original employment agreement with Norbridge, and, clipped to the back of it, a 3-page addendum. Abrsy, I slid it out. The paper was thick, heavier than standard office stock. The title at the top was unambiguous, IP Writer, Aegis Field of Use Exclusive. I scanned the familiar paragraphs, the dense legal language I had spent weeks crafting with my own lawyer before I ever signed their offer. My eyes landed on the critical clause, Section 3B, Reversion on Removal Without Notice. It read, in the event of the inventor's removal from a leadership role on the Aegis project or the stripping of public attribution without a mutually agreed upon transition period of no less than 30 days, Norbridge Dynamics' exclusive field of use license shall automatically revert to a non-exclusive license. The inventor, via their designated legal entity, shall have the right to cure this reversion within a 48-hour window by restoring the inventor's role and attribution. Failure to cure will result in the immediate and permanent termination of all licensing rights held by Norbridge Dynamics. I smoothed the paper flat on my desk. At the bottom of the last page were 2 signatures, mine and the heavy, confident scroll of the former CEO, Richard Sterling, the man who had hired me, the man who understood that to get the golden goose, you had to keep the goose happy. He had signed it in his signature blue fountain pen ink, a vivid slash of color against the black laser-printed text, a promise. I took my phone, switched it to camera mode. I didn't take a picture of the whole document. I framed the shot tightly, capturing only Section 3B and Richard's blue ink signature below it. The image was sharp, undeniable. I saved it to a secure folder. I leaned back in my chair, the soft leather creaking under my weight. The office noise returned, but it sounded different now. It was the sound of a machine running on borrowed time. They had made a mistake. They thought they were just firing an employee. They thought the asset was the code, the servers, the brand name they were so eager to optimize. They forgot Aegis doesn't belong to Norbridge. Aegis belongs to Mercer Atlas LLC, and I am Mercer Atlas LLC. This fortress I had built, this elegant trap, wasn't the product of a single afternoon's anger. It was constructed brick by brick, clause by clause, over 2 years of careful observation and cold calculation. It began, as all things of value do, long before Norbridge Dynamics ever knew my name. It started in my home office, a converted guest room that overlooked the rain-slicked streets of Seattle. For months, I had been working on a problem that had obsessed me since my days in quantitative finance: the static, backward-looking nature of credit risk analysis. The world's financial system was a dynamic, interconnected network, yet banks were still making billion-dollar decisions based on what amounted to a blurry photograph of the past. I wanted to give them a live video feed. I wanted to build a system that didn't just look at an individual's history, but at the web of events connected to them, and calculate the probability of a future default in real time. I called it Aegis. 6 months before Richard Sterling, Norbridge's then CEO, first called me, I finalized the core architecture. It was 3 a.m. I remember the quiet hum of my workstation, the taste of cold coffee, and a feeling of profound certainty. Before I went to sleep, before I told a single soul, I logged into the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office's online portal, acting as Mercer Atlas LLC, a legal entity I had established for this exact purpose. I filed a provisional patent application for the Aegis graph engine. That digital timestamp was the first brick in the wall. It established, in the eyes of the law, that Aegis was mine before I ever walked through their gleaming corporate lobby. When Norbridge came courting, they came on strong. Sterling was a rare breed of CEO who could actually understand the technology he was selling. He saw what Aegis was, not just an improvement, but a paradigm shift. He also saw me, the sole architect, the single point of failure and success. He wanted both locked down tight. The negotiation was a careful dance. They offered an astronomical salary, stock options that would vest over 4 years, a title. I listened patiently. When they were finished, I slid a single-page term sheet across the table. "I'm not interested in becoming a standard employee," I said. "I am the founder of this technology. Mercer Atlas LLC will license it to Norbridge." Ruth, their lawyers, balked. They wanted a full IP assignment, a work-for-hire agreement. They wanted to own Aegis. "That's not on the table," I replied, my voice even. "What is on the table is an exclusive license, but a limited one." I proceeded to define the limits, a field of use restriction. They could use Aegis for one purpose and one purpose only: business-to-business credit and lending services. Any other application, insurance, high-frequency trading, geopolitical risk, remained the sole property of Mercer Atlas LLC. They were getting the keys to the car, but I was keeping the title and the keys to the rest of the garage. Sterling, to his credit, understood. "She's not giving us the factory," he told his legal team. "She's giving us a dedicated assembly line. For the price, it's the deal of a lifetime." Then I laid down the most important brick. "There is one more condition," I said, "a non-negotiable one." I explained my reversion clause. I had seen too many brilliant engineers and founders get pushed out of their own companies once the corporate machine took over. The people who built the value were often the first to be deemed redundant by the people who merely packaged and sold it. My clause was an insurance policy against that uniquely American corporate tragedy. If they ever removed me from a leadership position on my own project without notice, or if they removed my name from it, the public attribution of my work, their exclusive license would detonate. It would automatically revert to a non-exclusive license for a 48-hour period. If they didn't cure the breach within that window by restoring my position and my name, the license would be terminated permanently. Brr, their general counsel, called it draconian. I called it an alignment of interests. Sterling saw the logic. "She's the asset," he argued. "The clause ensures we don't mismanage our most valuable asset. What are we worried about? As long as we treat her right, it's just ink on paper." He wanted to ensure the inventor was retained, and this was my price. To cement my position, I added another layer. I told them that as part of the deal, Mercer Atlas LLC would be filing a UCC-1 financing statement with the state. Their lawyers exchanged uneasy glances. A UCC-1 is a tool for lenders. It places a public lien on an asset, securing a creditor's interest. In this case, the asset was the Aegis patent and all its future derivatives. The debtor was Norbridge Dynamics. The creditor was my LLC. The loan agreement was my employment contract. If they defaulted on its terms, by firing me without notice, for example, my claim to repossess the patent would legally precede the claims of their other investors, debtors, or partners. I wasn't just licensing them my technology, I was holding it as collateral. Through all of this, I remember Camille Dorian. At the time, she was an interim VP of marketing, brought in to consult on branding. She sat in a few of the secondary negotiation meetings, radiating a glossy, restless impatience. When the lawyers started debating the specifics of the IP rider, her eyes would glaze over. She would tap her pen, check her phone under the table. Once, during a discussion of the UCC-1 filing, she actually interrupted. "Can we just agree that legal will handle the legal stuff?" she said, flashing a bright, dismissive smile. "I'd love to circle back to the third quarter launch deck." She was allergic to details, bored by anything that couldn't be summarized in a bullet point on a slide. She saw the contract as a tedious formality before the real work, the marketing, could begin. She never understood that the contract was the work. Ebrew. Once the agreement was signed with Richard Sterling's bold blue ink signature on the addendum, I began the final stage of my preparations. I compiled every piece of documentation related to the negotiation, every email draft, every redlined version of the contract, every message from their legal team confirming the terms, including a specific, crucial email from their general counsel stating, "Per our agreement, Norbridge will ensure Sloan Mercer is credited as lead architect of the Aegis engine in all partner-facing and public technical documentation." I loaded all of it onto a military-grade encrypted external hard drive. I took the extra step of running the entire data package through a digital notary service, which appended a cryptographically secure timestamp to every file. This created an impeachable, time-stamped record of the entire process. This was my Atlas lockbox. It lived in a fireproof safe in my home, completely disconnected from Norbridge's network, immune to their IT department, their server wipes, and their corporate revisionist history. It was my copy of the truth. I remember my last conversation with Sterling after the papers were all signed. He shook my hand and said, "I'm glad we could get this done, Sloan. You fought hard for your credit." I looked him in the eye and shook his hand firmly. "I don't need to fight for credit, Richard," I told him. "I just need to preserve the truth." Now, sitting at my desk, the ghost of that conversation echoing in my ears, I looked at the screen. Camille was talking about optimizing the brand narrative. Marcus Thorne was texting about maintaining a good relationship. They were living in a world of pleasant fictions. They had forgotten that their right to even use the word Aegis was built on a foundation of hard legal truth, and they had just taken a sledgehammer to it. Ebrew. The first public blow landed at 8:49 a.m. It was a company-wide memo from Camille. Its subject line, a declaration of conquest, Aegis by Norbridge, a new era of leadership. My name was nowhere in it. The memo itself was a masterclass in corporate revisionism, filled with energetic prose about synergy and forward momentum. It announced her as the new lead for the Aegis initiative, effective immediately. Reading it was like watching someone airbrush you out of a photograph. One moment you're there, the next, just empty space. The memo was the first formal, documented breach of the attribution clause. I downloaded a PDF copy and saved it. Breach number 1. Minutes later, a second assault arrived, this time with a wider blast radius. An email from the Corporate Communications Department, a draft of a press kit intended for a tech industry media push. The distribution list was limited to senior staff, a list from which I had not yet been purged. I opened the attached document. The headline was, "Norbridge Dynamics unveils proprietary Aegis engine." The body copy was even more egregious. It described Aegis as a wholly owned, in-house intellectual property, the result of years of internal development by Norbridge's dedicated RAND-D teams. It was a complete fabrication, a clumsy, arrogant lie designed to be repeated by journalists until it became the truth. They weren't just erasing me. They were trying to erase Mercer Atlas LLC from existence. I saved the draft press kit. Breach number 2. The third blow was a quiet, technical one, delivered by the silent, automated hands of the IT department. A notification from our code repository system appeared in my inbox. The subject was stark, repository ownership transferred. The log read, "Permission change, repository Aegis core, owner updated from S. Mercer to C. Dorian by system administrator." In the digital world where the work actually lived, my name had been chiseled off the cornerstone and replaced. They had seized the digital factory, but their control was an illusion. They could change the labels on the machines, but the original blueprints, the notarized and time-stamped proofs of creation, were safe in the Atlas lockbox, miles away and a million miles beyond their reach. Still, it was breach number 3. 3 violations in less than 30 minutes. They were efficient. I had to give them that. Then came the overreach, the move that transformed their campaign from a brutal corporate ousting into a fatal strategic blunder, an email from Norbridge Legal. Subject, your separation agreement. Attached was a PDF. I opened it. It was presented as a standard exit package, complete with a generous severance offer, hush money. But buried deep in the boilerplate on page 12, paragraph 18, subsection C, was the poison pill. The clause was a dense thicket of legalese, but its meaning was unmistakable. By signing, I would be agreeing to retroactively waive all moral rights of authorship and would affirm that any and all intellectual property created during my tenure was expressly and irrevocably considered work for hire, superseding any and all prior agreements, written or verbal. I read the words twice. They weren't just firing me, they were trying to trick me into legally validating their theft. This document was their confession. It was an admission that they knew their claim to Aegis was fragile, and this was their desperate, clumsy attempt to shore it up after the fact. They were trying to get me to sign away the very foundations of my power. Abruch, I almost laughed. Did they think I was that naive or that desperate? My fingers moved with a calm, deliberate speed. I did not reply to the legal department. I did not click decline or delete. Instead, I opened a new email in my Norbridge account. I addressed it to my personal, encrypted Proton mail address. In the subject line, I typed a simple private reference, Evidence Locker, NBD breach. I attached 2 files. The first was the poisonous separation agreement they had just sent me. The second was the crisp, clear photograph I had taken less than an hour ago, Section 3B of my IP writer, with Richard Sterling's defiant blue signature at the bottom. I hit send. The email vanished from my outbox, a perfect digital package containing their crime and my weapon, now safely stored outside their walls. E-Brewy Universe, it seems, has a flair for dramatic timing. At precisely 9:02 AL appeared. It was from a junior analyst at Harborline Pensions, the $40 million canary in the coal mine. Good morning, Sloan, it began, entirely unaware of the demolition taking place on the 43rd floor. Looking forward to our call tomorrow. Just a quick follow-up, as a final point of due diligence before our finance team wires the initial $40 million license tranche. Our counsel requires a final confirmation of the registered owner of USPTO provisional patent application number 63,505,50121, Aegis Graph Engine. Could you please send over the relevant documentation at your convenience? I stared at the email, a slow smile spreading across my face for the first time that morning. They had handed me a lighted match and pointed me toward the fuse. Before I could even begin to formulate a plan, my Slack icon blinked with an incoming direct message. It was Camille Sloan, her message began, dispensing with any pleasantries. I see IT hasn't removed you from the Harborline invite yet. That's fine. I will be leading the call now. I need you to join, but you are not to speak unless I address you directly. If they have any deep technical questions, I'll throw them to you. Keep your camera off. I'll introduce you as an internal technical consultant. It's critical we maintain a clean, unified message. The sheer, unadulterated arrogance of it was a thing to behold. She had publicly erased my name, presided over the theft of my work, and now wanted to use me as a disembodied, anonymous brain in a box to secure the funding for her new empire. She wanted me to perform as a technical puppet in my own execution. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I considered the options, a long, scathing reply, a detailed explanation of her mistake. But none of that was necessary. The most powerful move was the simplest. I typed a single word and pressed enter. No. The word sat in the chat window between us. Stark and absolute. A digital line drawn in the sand. I could almost feel her shock through the screen. She was a person who was not accustomed to being told no. She was typing, then she stopped, then she started again. While her reply was forming, I sent my follow-up. I said nothing. I simply clicked the paperclip icon and attached the photo from my phone, the image of the reversion clause with Sterling's signature. I hit send. The image populated in the chat window, a stark black-and-white contract with a slash of blue ink, a prophecy she had never bothered to read. And in that moment, the entire axis of the day shifted. The tension that had been compressing inside me all morning, a cold, dense weight of shock and insult, transformed into pure kinetic energy. The defense was over, the attack was beginning, Brofer, I closed Slack. I closed my email. I opened a new blank document. My hands were steady, my mind perfectly clear. At the top of the page, I typed the heading, Official Notice of License Reversion and Cure Period. I was no longer Sloan Mercer, the recently fired employee. I was Mercer Atlas LLC, a secured party, a creditor, and I was formally notifying Norbridge Dynamics of their default. I began to write the letter that would start the clock. Their 48-hour countdown to irrelevance had just begun. The document was finished. 2 pages of dense, precise, and unforgiving legal language citing the specific agreements, the specific breaches, and the specific brutal consequences. This was not a plea or a complaint. It was a declaration of legal fact. My emotional response to the morning's events, the shock, the insult, had been alchemized into a cold, clear battle plan. I was no longer an employee. I was the CEO of Mercer Atlas LLC, and it was time to execute. The systematic disassembly of Norbridge's short-lived fantasy began. Step 1, the notification. I opened my Mercer Atlas LLC email client, a separate and secure application from the Norbridge environment. I composed a new message. The recipient list was a carefully curated collection of detonation points. To General Counsel Norbridge Dynamics, Marcus Thorne, Interim CEO, Camille Dorian, VP Product, CC Head of Legal Harborline Pensions, Chief Investment Officer Fairgate Capital, Senior Partner Vidian Group. I was not just informing the company of their breach. I was informing their entire $220 million pipeline. The body of the email was surgically brief. To whom it may concern, please find the attached formal notice regarding the immediate reversion of the licensing status for the Aegis Graph Engine intellectual property. All exclusivity rights are hereby suspended as per the terms of the governing IP rider. The 48-hour cure period is now in effect. I attached the PDF and hit send. The first domino had been pushed. Step 2, the lien. I opened a web browser and navigated to the Secretary of State's online business portal. It was a clunky, gray interface, the kind of government website that felt 10 years out of date, but it was a portal to immense power if you knew how to use it. I logged into my account for Mercer Atlas LLC and located our existing UCC-1 filing against Norbridge Dynamics. I clicked File an Amendment. A simple text box appeared. I began to type. UCC-3 Amendment, Acknowledgement of Default. The debtor, Norbridge Dynamics, has triggered a default condition as outlined in Section 3B of the governing IP rider agreement dated October 2, 2023. The breach consists of the unnotified removal of the inventor from a leadership role and the public stripping of attribution. The secured party, Mercer Atlas LLC, hereby asserts its full security interest in the specified collateral, namely U.S. Provisional Patent Application Number 63,555,121 and all its derivatives. I submitted the form and paid the $15 filing fee. A public, searchable, permanent record of their default was now attached to the Aegis patent. Any investor, partner, or auditor who did their due diligence would now see a massive red flag flapping over Norbridge's most valuable asset. Step 3, the vendor squeeze. Norbridge didn't run Aegis on their own servers. No one does at that scale. They relied on a tripod of specialized infrastructure vendors, Pricematics Cloud for distributed computing, Griddle for data pipeline management, and Valancourt for encrypted storage. These companies were the foundation upon which Aegis operated. I drafted a new set of notices, this time addressed to the legal departments of all three. The language was carefully calibrated not to instruct them to cease services, which could be problematic, but to create paralyzing uncertainty. This notice is to inform you that the intellectual property known as the Aegis engine, currently operating on your platforms under contract with Norbridge Dynamics, is subject to a legal dispute regarding ownership and licensing rights due to a contractual default by the licensee. To mitigate potential secondary infringement liability, we strongly advise that you place an immediate hold on any planned integrations, deployments, or platform upgrades related to the Aegis engine until the licensing status is clarified. I was injecting sand into their operational gears. The notices would trigger internal legal reviews at all three vendors, flooding Norbridge's technical leadership with urgent calls from their most critical partners. Chaos was the objective. Step 4, the federal record. A state-level UCC filing was good. A federal record was better. I logged into the USPTO's assignment recordation system. It was another labyrinth of bureaucratic forms, but I navigated it with precision. I prepared a record of security interest. This document would formally attach the UCC lien to the patent's file in the National Patent Registry. It was the ultimate checkmate move for due diligence. From this moment on, anyone who looked up the Aegis patent on the official USPTO website would see Mercer Atlas LLC's name listed as a secured party with an active interest. It was a public and permanent stain on Norbridge's claim of ownership. Abrui, Step 5, seizing the agenda. The 9:30 a.m. Meeting with Harborline was still on my calendar, a relic of a world that no longer existed. I would not be attending that meeting. Instead, I would be hosting a new one. I created a new calendar invitation, time 11:30 a.m. Today, subject urgent material change to Aegis Engine IP license, attendees the full team from Harborline Pensions, and I added a new group of attendees, the senior partners at Wexler Stone, my own notoriously aggressive IP law firm. I sent the invitation. The message was clear. This was no longer a business update. It was a formal legal briefing, and I was coming with my lawyers. Abraha, Step 6, the dossier. I now had a 2-hour window before the Harborline call. I would not waste it. I opened another blank document and began to compile a statement of facts. It was not an argument or a narrative. It was a timeline, a dispassionate and chronological account of the morning's events. Each entry was supported by an exhibit. Exhibit A, email from HR Service Desk, 8:17 a.m., RE, VP Product Transition. Exhibit B, company-wide memo from Camille Dorian, 8:49 a.m., RE, Aegis by Norbridge, note omission of inventor's name. Exhibit C, draft press kit from Corporate Comms, 8:53 a.m., note false claims of proprietary and in-house IP. Exhibit D, Slack message from C. Dorian, 9:05 a.m., request for inventor to act as anonymous technical consultant. The list went on, a cold, factual autopsy of their coup. It was 2 pages long, and it was irrefutable. This would be my opening statement. Abroway, Steps 7, 8, and 9, preparing the next wave. I worked on 3 tracks simultaneously. I drafted a formal DMCA takedown notice, ready to be fired off to Norbridge's web host the second that fraudulent press kit went live. Next, I opened the term sheet for the $40 million Harborline deal. I did a find and replace. Norbridge Dynamics became Mercer Atlas LLC. The structure of the deal was sound. Only the licensor needed to change. I saved the new document under the file name Arclay Micro Term Sheet Draft. Arclay was Norbridge's most fearsome competitor. The document was a loaded weapon held in reserve. Finally, I opened a simple clock application on my desktop and set a countdown timer for 48 hours, 0 minutes, and 0 seconds. The official timestamp on my delivered notice of reversion was 9:10 a.m. The clock started ticking. Every second that passed was another molecule of leverage, another turn of the screw. Abrui, my desk was now a command center. The plan was in motion. Every action was precise, documented, and legally fortified. I had built Aegis to see the connections between disparate events and predict the future. For 2 years, I had used that same mindset to build this very plan, foreseeing this exact chain of corporate foolishness. They thought they had removed a troublesome employee. They were about to find out they had activated a system. The first counterattack came as expected, not from a lawyer, but from the person who had the most to lose. At 9:19 a.m., my personal cell phone, a number only a few people at Norbridge had, began to ring. The screen displayed Camille's name. I let it go to voicemail, then watched as a string of text messages began to pour in. They started as a single, furious burst. "Sloan, what do you think you're doing? You can't just send something like that to our partners. Call me now." When I didn't respond, her tone shifted to one of accusatory desperation. The final message was a classic of its kind, an attempt to reframe her aggression as my betrayal. "You are actively sabotaging this company. Our company." Abrosay. I picked up the phone. I didn't call her. I replied to that final text message with a single, cold sentence. "Your company is in violation of a contract you signed." The response was immediate. a series of dots that appeared and disappeared as she typed and deleted several replies before settling on, "That's ridiculous and you know it. Legal is handling this." It was a bluff, and we both knew it. Norbridge Legal was not a high-powered litigation firm. They were a handful of in-house attorneys who specialized in employment contracts and software licensing agreements. They were about to step into a minefield they didn't know existed. A brew. Their official response arrived at 10:03 a.m. It was an email from Howard Finch, their general counsel, addressed to me and CCing Marcus Thorne and Camille. It was a perfect specimen of corporate legal intimidation, arrogant, dismissive, and completely wrong. "Miss Mercer," it began, "we are in receipt of your frivolous and baseless notice. Let me be unequivocally clear. All work product, innovations, and intellectual property developed by an employee of Norbridge Dynamics during their tenure are considered work for hire as a matter of both company policy and established law. The Aegis engine is the sole and exclusive property of the company. We demand you immediately retract your erroneous communications to our partners, or Norbridge will be forced to pursue all available legal remedies for tortious interference and damages." They were firing a cannon, unaware they were standing on a trapdoor. I hit reply all. I attached one file, the PDF of my provisional patent application, complete with its official USPTO timestamp. My reply was even shorter than Finch's email. "Mr. Finch, attached for your records is the provisional patent application for the Aegis engine, filed with the United States Patent and Trademark Office on April 3, 2023. My employment at Norbridge Dynamics commenced on October 6, 2023. That is a difference of 187 days. The work was not for hire. It was licensed under the terms of the IP rider you have in your possession. Please advise." The silence that followed this email was profound. For nearly 30 minutes, there was no response. They were scrambling. I could picture the scene. Finch, red-faced, pulling up my employment file, reading the IP rider for the first time, the one Camille had dismissed as tedious legal jargon. Their second attempt was weaker, a legal Hail Mary. At 10:34 a.m., a new email from Finch arrived. "Even if we were to entertain your theory of prior invention," he wrote, "the shopwright doctrine would clearly apply. You utilized company resources, time, and equipment to further develop the Aegis engine. Therefore, Norbridge retains a non-exclusive, royalty-free license to use the technology in perpetuity. It was a decent argument if I hadn't prepared for it 2 years ago." I replied again, this time pasting a direct quote from the contract into the body of the email. Per the executed IP rider, Section 2A, this field-of-use license agreement is explicitly intended by all parties to supersede any and all claims of shopwright or any other implied license that might otherwise be inferred under common law. Your predecessors in this office signed a document that specifically waived the very right you are now attempting to claim. The terms of the rider are clear. The silence was punctuated by a flash of sheer incompetence from Camille. In the public Aegis launch Slack channel, a junior marketing associate, clearly confused by the morning's chaos, posted a question. "Hi, Camille Dorian. I'm updating the internal data room for the Harborline call. The old technical architecture documents still have S. Mercer listed as architect. Should I leave that for now?" Camille's reply was a burst of pure, unthinking frustration, a message that would become Exhibit E in my dossier. "Just get Sloane's name off everything," she wrote for the whole channel to see. "I need a clean, unified message for the launch. Erase it now." I took a screenshot. It was a written confession, time-stamped, of the exact contractual breach that had triggered the reversion. A moment later, a single emoji appeared in reply to her message. It was from the CTO, a man who rarely used Slack for anything but technical directives. It was the zipper-mouth face. Camille must have realized what she had done. A second later, her message vanished, replaced by the faint gray text, "This message was deleted." But it was too late. I took another screenshot, this one showing the deletion log and the CTO's silent, damning commentary. The 11:30 a.m. Zoom call began with a tableau of grim, anxious faces on the Norbridge side. Camille was there, looking pale. Howard Finch, their lawyer, was shuffling papers off camera. Marcus Thorne, the CEO, looked like he'd just been pulled from a car wreck. On my side, it was just me and Alan Wexler, a razor-sharp litigator from Wexler Stone, whose calm, predatory smile was worth every cent of his exorbitant hourly rate. The Harborline team looked on, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and deep concern. "C'est bruh," Alan began, his voice smooth and even. He didn't make accusations. He simply read from my statement of facts, a dispassionate, chronological telling of the morning's events, from the 8:17 email to Camille's deleted Slack message. When he finished, a heavy silence filled the virtual room. The lead investor from Harborline, a man named Peterson, unmuted himself. He ignored Alan and me and spoke directly to Marcus Thorne. "Mr. Thorne?" he said, his voice dangerously neutral, putting aside the contractual dispute for a moment. "I have a very simple due diligence question. Who is listed as the inventor and original applicant on the USPTO filing for this technology?" The question was a perfectly aimed rifle shot. On my screen, I watched the Norbridge team. Thorne looked at Finch. Finch looked at Camille. Camille stared at her own hands. No one spoke. The silence stretched. I counted the seconds in my head. 10, 20, 30. The awkwardness was becoming a physical presence. 40, 50. At 51 seconds, the silence had provided a louder answer than any words could have. I unmuted my microphone. The sound made them all flinch. "I can answer that for you, Mr. Peterson," I said, my voice steady and clear. "The applicant of record for United States Patent and Trademark Office application number 63,555,121 is a limited liability company by the name of Mercer Atlas. The secured party of record for Uniform Commercial Code filing number 223,092 is also Mercer Atlas, LLC. He broke. Howard Finch finally spoke, his voice strained. "This is clearly a complex situation that requires further review," he stammered. "Norbridge is prepared to issue a formal cure statement within 7 business days to address any—" I cut him off. "Mr. Finch," I said, my voice dropping the last pretense of collegiality, "if you refer to Section 3B of the executed agreement, the document you claimed this morning was irrelevant. You will find the cure period is explicitly defined as no more than 48 hours from the time of notification. Your legal department received that notification at 9:10 a.m. this morning." I let that sink in for a moment. I could see the blood drain from their faces as the final realization dawned. They were looking at the screen, but they were seeing a clock. "This is not an open-ended negotiation," I said, leaning into my camera. "This is a cure period. You do not have 7 days. You have 43 hours and 40 minutes left before your license to use my engine is permanently and irrevocably terminated." The digital meeting room, populated at precisely 11:30 a.m. on one side of the virtual table, was the Norbridge contingent, Marcus Thorne looking ashen, Howard Finch, their lawyer, visibly sweating under the studio lights of his home office, and Camille, who had arranged her face into a mask of defiant indignation that wasn't quite hiding the panic in her eyes. On the other side was Peterson and 2 associates from Harborline Pensions, their expressions unreadable, professional, and radiating an aura of immense financial gravity. In the middle was my team, Alan Wexler, who gave a placid, almost cheerful nod to the assembly, and me, a still point in the center of the hurricane I had summoned. "Good morning, everyone," I began, my voice even and calm. "Thank you for joining on such short notice. For the purposes of accuracy and record-keeping, this call is being recorded." A small red dot appeared in the corner of the screen. Finch flinched as if he'd been struck. "There is no need for—" He started to protest. Alan cut him off gently. "It's simply for clarity, Howard. I'm sure we all want a clear record of the facts." Peterson from Harborline gave a curt nod. "Proceed, Ms. Mercer." "I did not proceed with an argument. I proceeded with a presentation of evidence." "I will be brief," I said, sharing my screen. "I am simply going to walk you through a timeline of undisputed events, supported by documentation, to clarify the current situation regarding the Aegis engine IP." My screen displayed the prepared statement of facts. "Fact 1, I stated, my cursor highlighting the first line. On April 3, 2023, 187 days before my employment with Norbridge began, Mercer Atlas LLC filed a provisional patent application with the USPTO for the technology now known as the Aegis engine. The USPTO receipt is Exhibit A." I clicked, and the official receipt appeared on screen. Fact 2, I continued, moving to the next item. On October 6, 2023, as a condition of employment, an IP rider was executed by myself and then CEO Richard Sterling. This rider granted Norbridge a specific field of use exclusive license. It also contained a reversion clause, Section 3B, triggered by removal or stripping of attribution without notice. The signature page is Exhibit B. I showed them the image of the contract. Sterling's blue ink a vibrant testament to the agreement. Fact 3. On October 10, 2023, Mercer Atlas LLC filed a UCC-1 security interest against the Aegis patent, with Norbridge Dynamics listed as the debtor. The state filing confirmation is Exhibit C. I moved on, my voice a steady, unemotional metronome of factual recitation. I walked them through the morning's events, displaying each piece of evidence in turn, the 8:17 a.m. termination email, Camille's 8:49 memo erasing my name, the 8:53 draft press kit. I did not editorialize. I simply read the words from their own documents. E. Berthoud, Exhibit D, the draft press kit states, and I quote, Norbridge Dynamics unveils proprietary Aegis engine, a wholly owned in-house intellectual property. I present this for the record. I move to the next exhibit. Exhibit E, the separation agreement sent to me by your legal department at 8:58 a.m. I draw your attention to subsection C, which requires a signature to, and I quote, retroactively waive all moral rights of authorship, superseding any and all prior agreements. Finally, I displayed the screenshots from Slack. Exhibit F, a message posted by Ms. Dorian in a public channel at 10:41 a.m., instructing a colleague to, quote, just get Sloane's name off everything, erase it. Followed by Exhibit G, the log showing the subsequent deletion of that message. Hey, bro. I stopped sharing my screen. The silence was absolute. I had not accused them of anything. I had simply held up a mirror. Alan Wexler leaned forward, his expression one of polite inquiry. Sloane, he said, as if asking a simple, clarifying question in a classroom, for the benefit of everyone on this call, based on the reversion clause in Exhibit B, what is the current legal status of Norbridge's license? Under the terms of the rider, I answered, looking directly at my webcam, the moment the breach occurred, their exclusive license was automatically suspended. Their current status is an interim non-exclusive license, pending the outcome of the 48-hour cure period. Peterson from Harborline unmuted. His eyes were fixed on me, but his question was for the universe. And if this situation is not cured, as you say, within the 48-hour window, what happens then? He Burfree, I answered him directly, per Section 3 of the rider. Failure to cure results in the immediate and permanent termination of all licensing rights held by Norbridge Dynamics. I let the word permanent hang in the air. As I spoke, I opened the chat window in Zoom. I am providing a redacted copy of the IP rider for your counsel's review, I said, dragging the file into the chat. The financial terms have been omitted, but the relevant clauses and the signature page are intact. On the screen, I watched Peterson's gaze flicker down as he presumably opened the file. The Norbridge team was frozen, statues in a diorama of their own making. A profound quiet descended upon the call. The only sound was from Peterson's microphone, which was still open, a soft, rhythmic sound, tap, tap, tap. It was the sound of his pen against the surface of his desk, the sound of a $40 million decision being weighed. The tapping stopped. Peterson looked up. His face was a mask of cold, professional finality. Thank you, Ms. Mercer, Mr. Wexler, he said, his voice devoid of any warmth. That has been exceptionally illuminating. Mr. Thorne, he continued, his gaze shifting to the interim CEO, effective immediately, Harborline Pensions is placing an indefinite hold on the $40 million tranche scheduled to be wired tomorrow. All capital deployment related to this initiative is suspended, pending a full, complete, and satisfactory resolution of this intellectual property ownership issue. Do not contact us. We will be in touch with our decision. Before anyone from Norbridge could respond, Peterson and his two associates vanished from the call. Their little black squares on the screen disappeared, leaving a gaping hole in the meeting. The remaining parties, me, my lawyer, and the architects of my dismissal, sat in a stunned, dead silence. Marcus Thorne looked like he was going to be sick. Camille was staring wide-eyed, as if she couldn't comprehend what had just happened. I let the silence sit for a moment longer, then I delivered the final, quiet blow. It was not for them. It was for the record and for the ears of the investors who would eventually listen to this recording. For the minutes of this meeting, I said, my voice calm and clear, let the record show that Mercer Atlas LLC stands ready to engage in good faith licensing discussions to ensure the continued development of the Aegis engine as soon as the current licensing uncertainties are resolved. I then looked at Alan, and we both clicked leave meeting, plunging the Norbridge leadership team into a silent, virtual room to contemplate the ruins of their morning. Abra. I didn't wait in the virtual room. The moment I disconnected from the call, I began the physical process of my own erasure. I walked over to the small bookshelf by my desk and began pulling my personal reference books. My copies of Knuth, my well-worn edition of The Art of Computer Programming, and placing them in my briefcase. Let them have the chair and the monitor. I was taking the knowledge. The sound of hurried, expensive heels on polished concrete announced her arrival. Camille appeared at the entrance to my cubicle, her face a blotchy mess of fury and panic. She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Not here, she hissed, her eyes darting around the open-plan office where heads were now openly turned, watching the drama unfold. She pulled me down the main thoroughfare, past the silent, staring faces of my colleagues and into a small, glass-walled huddle room. The door slid shut with a soft whoosh, encasing us in a soundproof box of sterile white light and recycled air. Okay, she said, her voice a strained whisper. This has gone far enough. This is insane. I said nothing. I simply looked at her. What do you want, Sloan? She demanded. What's the price? You want your name back on it? Fine, we'll put your name back on it. We'll add a slide to the very end of the launch deck. Original concept by Sloan Mercer. There. Are we done? Her offer was so profoundly stupid, so completely ignorant of the scale of the situation that it was almost breathtaking. She thought this was about a bruised ego. She thought this was a problem that could be solved with a footnote. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a folded document, a hard copy of the IP writer. I placed it on the small circular table between us and smoothed it flat. I tapped my finger on section 3B. The cure, Camille, I said, my voice low and devoid of any emotion, is not a slide in a deck. The cure is the full and immediate restoration of my leadership role on the Aegis project and the public, top-line correction of my attribution in every single internal and external document where it has been removed. That is what the contract stipulates. Hapersh, her face went pale. You can't be serious. You don't actually expect to get your job back. The door slid open again, and Marcus Thorne hurried in, his phone pressed to his ear. No, I understand, but it's more complicated than that, he was saying before he saw me and hung up. Sloan, he said, trying for a tone of weary reasonableness, let's be practical. Reversing an HR decision like this isn't simple, but we value you. We can create a new role, honorary advisor to the Aegis initiative, a senior consulting position. You'd still be involved. They were offering me a plaque, a ceremonial title with no power, no authority, and no access, a way for them to technically placate me while keeping me neutered. I didn't even grant him a verbal response. I just shook my head once. My phone buzzed on the table, a notification from a news alert I had set up for the company's social media. I glanced down. It was from Twitter. The official Norbridge Dynamics account had just posted less than a minute ago. It was a pre-scheduled tweet, a ghost from a marketing plan conceived in another lifetime, get ready for the future of fintech. Aegis, the proprietary exclusive engine from Norbridge Dynamics, is coming fourth quarter. Innovation disruption. They were actively, publicly making the exact false ownership claim that was at the heart of the dispute. Even as we were in this room arguing about it, the incompetence was staggering. I picked up my phone, I opened my email drafts, I found the one I had prepared, addressed to the legal departments of Twitter and Norbridge's cloud hosting service. The subject line was, DMCA takedown notice regarding copyright IP infringement. I hit send. Thebroe, the door opened again. This time it was Howard Finch, the lawyer, looking even more distressed than the CEO. Marcus, it's not there, he said, his voice cracking. IT has been trying to purge that document Sloan sent to Harborline from the shared data room, but they can't find it. It was never uploaded. I looked at him, my expression blank. Of course it's not there, you idiot, I thought. I attached it to an email from an external server. You can't delete what you don't control. Marcus's phone rang again, a shrill, insistent chirp. He looked at the caller ID, and his face tightened. "It's the CFO," he muttered, and jabbed the speakerphone button. "What is it, Frank?" "Marcus, what the hell is going on?" The voice from the speaker was pure panic. "I just got off the phone with our bankers. They're getting calls. The Harborline deal is frozen, and the word is there's a lien on the Aegis patent. Is that true? Tell me there is a way to keep the exclusive license. Tell me you can fix this." Before Marcus could formulate a lie, I answered the question for him. My voice cut through the room, cold and sharp. "Yes, there is a way," I said to the phone. "Honor the document you signed." "This is ridiculous," Camille finally exploded, her composure shattering completely. "This is all based on some obscure addendum I've never even seen. I didn't sign that, Ryder. It was the final, fatal mistake, the lie that sprang from pure desperation." "You're right," I said calmly. I slid the printed copy across the table to her. "You didn't. Richard Sterling did. His blue signature was like a rebuke from the grave." But I continued, picking up my own phone. "You did approve it." I navigated to a screenshot I had saved in my Atlas lockbox. It was from Norbridge's own internal document approval system. I turned the phone and held it in front of her face. The screen showed the approval history for the File Sloan Mercer IP Rider addendum, and there, logged with an immutable digital timestamp, was the proof. Step 3, reviewed by Camille Dorian, VP Marketing, October 2nd, 2023, 4:15 p.m. Step 4, approved by Camille Dorian, VP Marketing, October 2nd, 2023, 4:16 p.m. "While you didn't provide a wet signature," I explained, "you were a required approver in the sign-off chain before it went to Richard. Your digital signature, your approval, is right there. You approved the document you now claim you've never seen." Camille stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing silently. She had been caught in a clear, undeniable, and documented lie. Just as the reality of her predicament seemed to land, the glass door slid open one more time. It was Marcus's executive assistant, a young woman who looked terrified. "Marcus, Camille," she stammered. "The chairman of the board is on a conference line for you and for Miss Mercer. He says it's not a request. Iberhui." And there it was, the knot. The moment they realized this wasn't going to be solved with a quick backroom apology, they thought they were dealing with a disgruntled employee they could placate or bully. They had just been informed that they were now dealing with the board of directors. The problem had escaped the room, and my legal 48-hour clock was still ticking, indifferent to all of them. The walk to the executive boardroom on the 50th floor was the longest of my life. The air up here was different, thinner, quieter. The carpet was thicker, absorbing the sound of our footsteps. Marcus and Camille walked ahead of me, a grim, silent pair on their way to the gallows. I followed at a measured pace, not as their condemned colleague, but as their executioner. We were all being summoned by the board, but we were not equals. As we neared the heavy oak doors of the boardroom, my personal phone vibrated in my pocket. It was not a call, but a message on a secure messaging app. The sender was a senior executive at Arclay Micro, Norbridge's most hated and feared competitor. I had known him for years. We shared a mutual respect and a healthy appetite for opportunity. The industry's upper echelons are a small, gossipy village, and the news of Norbridge's self-inflicted wound had clearly made the rounds. The message was brief. Sloan heard there might be an asset coming into play. See attached. Attached was a formal 2-page letter of intent. I opened it. The terms were stunning in their simplicity and aggression. If Norbridge's exclusive license for Aegis was terminated, Arclay Micro was prepared to immediately execute a 3-year exclusive licensing deal directly with Mercer Atlas LLC. The price, $70 million per year. A $210 million deal dropped into my lap at the moment of my greatest leverage. This was the card I hadn't known I was holding. I did not reply to the message. I did not brandish the offer in front of Marcus or Camille. I performed a much quieter and much more lethal maneuver. I logged into the secure online portal for the Norbridge Board of Directors. As a senior director, I still had access to the data room for emergency meetings. I saw the folder for today's call, already populated with the company's financials and a copy of my own reversion notice. I uploaded a new file, the letter of intent from Arclay Micro. I titled the document simply, Inbound Alternative Licensing Proposal, Aegis Engine. In the description field, I added a single, crucial line of text, receipt acknowledged at 12:03 p.m. Proposal is subject to the termination of the current Norbridge Dynamics license. I was not breaching my contract. I was merely informing the board of their fiduciary duty to consider all offers. I was showing them the precise $210 million cost of failing to cure the breach. E.A. Bruff. We entered the boardroom. A large screen at the end of the table lit up, and the face of Julian Croft, the chairman of the board, appeared. He was a severe man in his late 60s with cold eyes and a voice that had ended careers. He was not joined by the other board members. He was speaking for them. "I have read the documents," he said without preamble. His eyes flickered, indicating he had just seen the new file pop up in his data room. I saw a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in his expression. The math was not difficult. This was no longer just about losing the $220 million pipeline. This was about handing it, gift-wrapped, to their mortal enemy. "Miss Dorian," Croft said, his voice flat, "do you have anything to add to what I've read?" Camille, summoning a final, desperate burst of corporate bravado, spoke. "Mr. Chairman," she said, her voice tight, "this is clearly a monetary dispute that has been escalated unnecessarily. I believe the simplest path forward is for the company to make Ms. Mercer a significant cash offer to acquire the Aegis IP outright and settle this matter cleanly. She was trying to buy me, to reduce my life's work to a line item in a settlement, a problem that money could make disappear." Before Croft could even respond, I unmuted my microphone. "Mr. Chairman," I said, "a moment ago I uploaded the 3 independent valuation reports for the Aegis licensing pipeline, conducted 6 months ago. As you know, they project a 36-month value of $220 million. Any discussion of an acquisition would, of course, have to begin at that valuation, not at the level of an employee severance package. I had just turned her offer of a cheap buyout into a 9-figure corporate acquisition, an impossible sum for them to justify. I uploaded the valuation files to the data room as I spoke. Ibrahim Croft's gaze shifted to me. "Ms. Mercer," he said, cutting through the noise, "the contract your counsel has repeatedly cited specifies a 48-hour cure period. In your view, what does a cure entail?" This was the moment. I did not hesitate. I laid out my terms. They were not a request. They were the price of their survival. "A cure is not a cash payment, Mr. Chairman," I began. "A cure is a complete and total restoration of the conditions under which the license was granted. Specifically, it requires 4 actions. 1. My full reinstatement, not as director, but as general manager of the Aegis division, a new business unit with full operational and P&L responsibility. I will report directly to the board, not to the current executive leadership. 2. A permanent, irrevocable inventor attribution clause. It will be filed as a formal amendment to the Norbridge Corporate Charter, ensuring my name can never be stripped from my work again by any future management team. 3. A public apology and formal retraction. The company will issue a press release, personally approved by me, correcting the false statements of ownership it made this morning and publicly acknowledging my role as the architect of the Aegis engine. And 4, I concluded, a one-time breach of contract penalty payable to Mercer Atlas LLC, equal to all legal fees incurred today, plus a liquidated damages sum of $1 million. This is not a buyout, it is a fine. The silence on the line was heavy. Frank, the CFO, who had patched into the call, was the first to speak, his voice thin with anxiety. "Mr. Chairman, if we agree to these extensive terms, do we get the Harbor Line deal back? Does this preserve the pipeline?" I answered for him. "If the cure is executed in full and I receive signed confirmation of all 4 points before the deadline expires, I will immediately withdraw the reversion notice. The exclusive license will be fully restored. Harbor Line will have its certified patent holder back in command of the project. The pipeline will be secure." Croft's icy gaze turned to his own lawyer. "Howard," the chairman said, "for the final confirmation of this board, is Ms. Mercer's position, her interpretation of her rights under this rider, and the consequences of failing to cure, legally sound?" Ibrahim Finch looked down, his shoulders slumped. He was a man who knew he was utterly and completely outmaneuvered. He cleared his throat. "Yes, Mr. Chairman," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "It is." "Burhi," I glanced at Camille's image on the screen. Her face was a mask of disbelief and horror. The color had drained from her cheeks. In that moment, she finally understood. She thought I wanted money, a golden parachute, a quiet exit. She had built her entire strategy around the idea that my loyalty, my principles, my very identity were for sale. She was just now realizing that this was never about a payout. I didn't want their money. I wanted my truth put back in its proper place. I wanted the throne. Hebrew Julian Croft looked at his watch. "This board will now deliberate in a private session," he announced, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Marcus, Camille, Ms. Mercer, you will all remain available. Everyone on this line will reconvene at precisely 12:40 p.m. for our final decision. Do not be late." The line went dead, plunging the boardroom into a thick, suffocating silence. The clock was ticking, 37 minutes to the final verdict. The 37 minutes of deliberation felt like a lifetime suspended in amber. We remained in the 50th floor boardroom, a trio locked in a state of Cold War. Marcus paced by the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring down at the city as if searching for an escape route. Camille sat rigid at the enormous table, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Her earlier defiance curdled into a brittle, silent fury. I sat perfectly still, my focus on the blank, black screen at the end of the room. The countdown clock on my laptop showed 39 hours and change remaining. My clock, the only one that mattered. At precisely 12:40 p.m., the screen flickered to life. It was not just Julian Croft this time. It was a grid of solemn, powerful faces, the entire board of directors of Norbridge Dynamics, patched in from their offices in New York, London, and Hong Kong. Frank, the CFO, was there. Howard Finch, the lawyer, looked smaller than ever in his little square. And, in a move of pure, calculated stagecraft by the chairman, Peterson from Harborline Pensions was on the call, his expression impassive, a silent, multi-billion-dollar juror. Julian Croft's voice filled the room, as cold and absolute as a judge's gavel. "This meeting of the board is now in session. We have all reviewed the documents provided and the summary of the morning's events. We will now proceed to a final decision." He wasted no time. His gaze pinned the CFO. "Mr. Franklin, as the chief financial officer of this company, you will advise the board. Does management recommend accepting Ms. Mercer's stipulated terms to cure the license default?" Hebrew Frank, the CFO, did not hesitate. He was a man of numbers, and the numbers were screaming at him. "Mr. Chairman, members of the board," he said, his voice clear and urgent, "my recommendation, in the strongest possible terms, is to accept all of Ms. Mercer's terms without modification or delay. The alternative is the certain termination of the exclusive license by 4 p.m. tomorrow, the immediate and permanent collapse of the Harborline deal, the vaporization of the entire $220 million Aegis pipeline, and, given the document I have just reviewed from Arclay Micro, the very real probability that our primary competitor will acquire this cornerstone asset within the week. From a fiduciary and financial standpoint, any other course of action would be catastrophic." Before the weight of his words could fully settle, Camille lunged forward, her voice high and sharp with desperation. "Mr. Chairman, this is not just about numbers, it's about the future of the product. I have the go-to-market strategy, the launch plan is ready, I have the vision to take Aegis global. This is a leadership issue, and I can lead this product more effectively. Abref." Her voice trailed off as I shared my screen. It was not a document they had seen before. The title was simple: Attribution Breach Log, September 14th, October 14th. It was a spreadsheet, a cold, factual ledger of her campaign against me. I had been keeping it for weeks. "Leadership, Ms. Dorian," I said, my voice cutting cleanly through her plea, "is not demonstrated by a pattern of systematic erasure." I pointed my cursor to the entries. September 20th, submission to the FinTech Innovation Summit, my name removed as co-presenter. September 28th, internal project wiki, lead architect status changed from my name to yours. October 3rd, partner-facing technical brief for the Valancourt integration, all references to my work removed. There are 7 distinct instances in the last 30 days alone. The events of this morning were not an error in judgment, they were the culmination of a deliberate strategy. I stopped sharing. Camille stared at the screen, speechless. I had just presented the board with documented proof of her premeditation. Julian Croft turned his attention to the most important man on the call. "Mr. Peterson," he said, "the board values our partnership with Harborline. You have heard the competing arguments. I ask you plainly, is your firm's investment contingent on a particular leadership structure for this project? Peterson's answer was delivered without a flicker of emotion. It was a statement of pure business reality. Mr. Chairman, he said, let me be clear. We are not investing in a PowerPoint deck or a go-to-market strategy. We are investing $40 million in a revolutionary piece of technology. Our investment committee's approval was and remains contingent on the singular genius who architected that technology being in full and absolute command of its destiny. We need the inventor at the helm. If Ms. Mercer is not in charge, Harborline Pensions will withdraw its offer and seek opportunities elsewhere. There is no ambiguity on this point. Shibri, the execution was complete. All that remained was the sentencing. Croft's gaze swiveled to his own lawyer. Howard, for the final confirmation of this board, is the reversion clause in Ms. Mercer's rider legally binding, and is the UCC one filing by her entity a senior security interest against this patent? Howard Finch looked like a man who wished the earth would swallow him whole. He gave a small, defeated nod. Yes, Mr. Chairman, he mumbled. The rider is ironclad. Her UCC1 filing gives her a superior lien on the asset ahead of most other creditors. The chess game was over. The chairman's tone shifted from inquiry to command. He addressed me directly, no longer as a litigant, but as the counterparty in a corporate surrender. Ms. Mercer, the board is prepared to vote on a motion to accept your 4 terms in their entirety. If this motion passes, and we provide you with a binding, executed board resolution confirming your new role as general manager, the filing of the charter amendment, the public retraction, and the penalty payment, will you then withdraw the reversion notice? This was the final lock. They were offering me the promise of a cure. I required the cure itself. Mr. Chairman, I replied, my voice calm and precise, ensuring every board member understood my final, non-negotiable term. I will withdraw the reversion notice the absolute moment the cure is fully and completely executed. That means the signed, board-ratified contract for my new role is delivered to my counsel. It means I have received confirmation from the Secretary of State's office that the charter amendment has been filed, and it means the public apology and retraction has been posted to all of Norbridge's official corporate communication channels. I paused, letting the weight of my conditions settle. Not a promise, not a resolution to act, the actions themselves, not one moment before. Ray. My final condition hung in the dead air of the virtual boardroom. It was not a negotiation. It was the terms of surrender. Julian Croft stared at me from the screen, his expression unreadable. For a moment, I thought he might balk at the sheer audacity of it, the demand for action before treaty, but then his eyes flickered to the Arclay micro-loy in his data room, and then to the grim face of Peterson from Harborline. He was a man trapped in a logic problem of my design, and there was only one solution. A vote is called, Croft announced, his voice a flat, hard instrument of command. The motion before the board is to accept the 4 terms of the cure as stipulated by Miss Mercer, to be executed immediately. All in favor? On the screen, I watched the hands of the board members go up one by one. 6 hands, 1 director, a holdover from the old regime, kept his hand down, a final, futile gesture of dissent. The motion carries, 6-1, Croft declared at 12:58 p.m. His attention snapped away from the board and became a focused beam of execution. Corporate Secretary, you will draft the board resolution and the employment agreement for the role of General Manager, Aegis Division, for Sloan Mercer. You will transmit it to her counsel, Mr. Wexler, within the next 10 minutes. Howard, he barked at his lawyer, you will file the charter amendment electronically the moment the resolution is signed. PR Department, you will draft a new press release and send it to Ms. Mercer for her sole and final approval. Frank, you will arrange the penalty payment. Move now. It was like watching a bomb disposal unit moving with frantic, synchronized precision. The next 20 minutes were a blur of digital transactions, a rapid-fire cascade of capitulations delivered via email and secure server. At 1:06 p.m., a draft press release landed in my inbox. The headline was a masterpiece of corporate reversal. Norbridge Dynamics reaffirms partnership on Aegis Engine, appoints inventor Sloan Mercer as general manager. I scanned the key sentence. We are proud to continue our exclusive licensing partnership for the Aegis Engine, an innovative technology architected and invented by our new general manager, Sloan Mercer, who will lead the division into its next phase of growth. I replied to their head of PR with a single word: approved. Ibrurat 1:11 p.m. A notification chimed softly on my laptop. It was an email from the Harborline Pensions Treasury Department. The subject line was simple: wire transfer confirmation, 40 million USD. The money was in, the pipeline was restored. Peterson had kept his word, acting the moment the board had capitulated. At 1:14 p.m., I sent a brief, secure message to my contact at Arclay Micro. The internal situation has been resolved. The license remains exclusive with Norbridge. Thank you for your interest. The reply was instantaneous. Understood. A well-played hand. Congratulations. Another time, perhaps. I read the message of validation from the only other person in the world who truly understood the game we were playing. And then I closed the chat window. The $210 million threat had served its purpose. It was holstered. At 1:17 p.m., the final piece of the old regime was swept from the board. Julian Croft addressed Camille directly, his voice stripped of all ceremony. "Ms. Dorian," he said, "effective immediately, you are removed from any and all responsibilities related to the Aegis project. Your corporate access will be suspended. The board is placing you on a mandatory leave of absence, pending the results of a formal leadership and conduct review. It was a corporate execution delivered live. The leadership review was a black hole from which no executive career ever escaped." I watched Camille's face on the screen. The mask of defiance finally cracked, and for a fleeting second I saw pure, unadulterated shock, the face of someone who had gambled everything and lost in the most public way imaginable. Then her screen went dark. My own lawyer's face appeared in a private chat window. "Sloan, we have it all. Signed resolution, executed contract, filing receipt for the charter amendment. You are clear." I opened the final document on my desktop, the one I had prepared that morning, withdrawal of reversion notice. I affixed my digital signature. As I did, I glanced at the countdown clock that had been running all day. I stopped it. The timer froze with 27 hours, 43 minutes, and 12 seconds remaining. The war was over. Before Croft could adjourn the meeting, I unmuted my microphone one last time. "Mr. Chairman," I said, "one final detail to ensure a smooth internal transition and prevent any remaining ambiguity." Croft sighed, a sound of pure exhaustion. "What is it, Ms. Mercer?" "I require a company-wide email to be sent from Marcus Thorne's office within the hour," I said. "It will acknowledge the unauthorized and erroneous communications of this morning. It will explicitly apologize for the stripping of my attribution, and it will unequivocally reaffirm my role and contributions to the Aegis project. I want no gray areas left for interpretation among the staff. I was salting the earth, ensuring no part of their narrative could ever grow back." Beabrushy Croft nodded, his expression grim. "Done," he said. "Consider it done." I didn't need to say thank you. I simply clicked leave meeting. The grid of faces, the boardroom, the entire chaotic universe of the call vanished. My screen went black. And in the polished, dark surface, I saw my own reflection. My face was calm, my expression unchanged. There was no triumph, no joy, just the quiet, profound satisfaction of a complex equation finally perfectly solved. I packed the last of my books into my briefcase, stood up, and walked out of the boardroom. I didn't look at Marcus, who was slumped in his chair, a man hollowed out. I walked down the silent, carpeted hallway of the executive wing. As I passed Camille Dorian's corner office, I saw a man from building services standing by the door with a small toolkit. He was looking at the nameplate beside the door, a polished silver plaque that read, "Camille Dorian, VP Product." As I walked past, I heard a soft, metallic click, the sound of the plaque being released from its holder. I didn't turn to watch it fall. I just kept walking. Abrusui. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from, so please drop a comment below to say hello and share your thoughts. If you enjoyed this, I'd be so grateful if you would subscribe to the channel, like this video, and consider hitting that button to help this story reach more listeners just like you.